With this, we move to the last panel of the day. For this, I would like to invite Mr. Rajneesh, the consulting editor of APAC News Network, to come on stage and invite the speakers for this panel discussion. Over to you, Rajneesh.
Thanks, Shobik. And it's again challenging. It's the last panel discussion before we break up for the awards function, the highlight of the evening. So before I invite the panelists, I would request all of you to keep the discussion brief and concise, and the important points we will discuss very briefly and precisely. So it's my pleasure to invite the panelists on stage now. Let us welcome Professor Chandrasekhar Dubey, Vice Chancellor, R.K. Mangalam University, Gurugram. A round of applause for Professor Dubey. Mr. Sudhanshu Verma, CEO of Bennett University. A round of applause for Mr. Verma. Let me welcome Professor Prem Vrat, Pro-Chancellor of the North Cap University, Gurugram, and Chairman of Board of Governors at IIT Indian School of Mines, Dhanbad. Welcome, Professor Prem Vrat. Let's welcome Sahil Agarwal, CEO and co-founder of Rishi Hood University. I would also like to welcome Dr. Ankit Gandhi, Pro-Vice Chancellor, University of Technology, Jaipur. And we would also like to welcome Manish Mohta, Managing Director of Learning Spiral. As I mentioned, we will try to keep this as precise and concise as possible, and would like to discuss certain important aspects of NEP, which is impacting the digital transformation of institutions of higher education. And one of the very important aspects which there is an intention of the NEP to do is the current model of exams that is followed and the assessment methods. So I will start with you, Mr. Sudhanshu Verma. How are universities ready for a more uniform assessment system in the new model?
Thanks. So I want to say something before I begin. I am the only non-academician on the floor right now. आप यूनिवर्सिटी चलाते हैं.
I just missed out on one more panelist. We have like to welcome Dr. Parvinder Singh, Vice Chancellor of Rahat Bahara University of Mohali, on stage.
See, Sahil, you started a university. I didn't even do that. So with the background of a non-academician, see, I think so there are two parts to the evaluation and assessment that you talk of. One is conducting the exams and quizzes the way we do. And the other is and I think the intent is very good, is something what we call as the, it's the continual assessment, which doesn't really try and assess a student as to what his ability is to answer in that 1 hour or 2 hours of a test paper. if you were to ask me, I think the core intent of education is not about assessment. The core intent of education is of imparting knowledge. Now, if you look at why someone would join a university to do an undergrad or a postgrad, is because there is an intent in that student to actually gain that knowledge, gain that skill, get that degree and make a career or a life for himself or herself. Now, if our intent marries that intent, and I'll say this very bluntly, I am dead against something called an exam or a test or a quiz. It does nothing but honestly makes a brilliant guy feel he's an idiot. 2 days back, I was talking to someone and we were discussing, and that person was saying, my son has given JEE and I'm not sure how much they will score. I said, how does JEE matter? Means score to aana chahiye. Now the thing is, it's that 3 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour as to how your brain functions that the test will tell you whether you are good, bad or ugly. So to me, I think a continual assessment system, if put into place, is far more brilliant. Now when it comes to can we do it, are we ready for it? I think we've been ready for it from day one, as all higher education institutions. It's just a question of opening our mind and saying, instead of a physical paper pen, I will now do it on a digitized module.
Okay.
That's my...
Okay, so a continuous assessment model, and whether the question is universities are ready or not. Professor Dubey, I'll come to you again with a similar question on basically what are your views, how universities are ready for this continuous assessment type of model?
The day, can you hear me please? Yeah. So, the day, the UGC system with the NAC accreditation came up, I think that was the right time, that the beginning of the examination system, the whole system, what he is saying is trying to, change. In the sense that, the examinations now, NAC says different things. They have aligned it with the national education policy, with the new education policy, with the sustainable development goals, with the criteria that are required for the continuous assessment, what sir is saying, that in the sense that, you have to go for more understanding of the thing, more creative thinking for the things, and then evaluate the things in that way. Whether you are doing a skill study or you're doing a research. So more evaluation in forms of, yes, right, continuous assessment, but more creative and more kind of a, skill, more research inputs in the sense that if a student is not only learning and trying to get a graduation, the degrees are being unbundled now. When I say when degrees are being unbundled, means in NEP you can see that you have 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year programs. Unbundling the degrees, Ryan Craig is an expert on that. 2016 he made a book on that. And he said that the way the long time of education is going on, it is going to be disrupted. And when it is going to be disrupted, it will be disrupted in the form of that you have courses like edX and UDA cities are doing, with the more trust with the industry, linking especially the all experiential learning, creative thinking, and the skills with the industry. So that kind of evaluation is required now.
Thank you. Dr. Parvinder Singh, taking a cue from this, how are universities geared up from shifting? Right now the assessment method is more content based, and that's why this rote learning system, to what even Professor Dubey talked about, is a more a competency based kind of assessment. So how are universities ready for this shift?
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to share this platform with a very wisdomful colleagues by APAC. I congratulate them also for this two days mega event. And the topic which you have chosen, they are really the need of hour. With the change of the shift, particularly NEP has come, and the same time, incidentally, this pandemic that struck to the globe also. So both things happened simultaneously. We were not prepared for the change of the assessment. Pre-pandemic was different, during pandemic it changed, and now it has altogether changed. So keeping the different verticals as suggested by UGC, no university in India, more than 1,000 universities, particularly the private segment and the deemed universities, so they are having around 100 programs in their universities. There is no constraint for the new program, so they are the need-based program which they have come into the scenario, and we are competing globally. So as far as assessment, we cannot afford to have the conservative system of the assessment. We need to change. If we have changed, we have adopted and we have applied technology, I think this is the right time. Some good private organization should shake hand with the universities, particularly higher education institution. They should be the catalyst how to adopt a assessment procedure. It should be transparent, it should be efficient, and it should be unchallenged, and it should not be only the academic, but some component from the industry is required. At the moment, our student who could not attend the classes for long time, that more than 25, 26 months, they have the big challenge in them. Employability is a big challenge. Industry need good people. Academicians need to produce good stuff for the industry. So the assessment criteria is to be relooked, it should be redesigned, and it should be reinvented so that as per the NEP, with so much student-centric this policy, we need to apply the latest component of the assessments. That's my personal submission.
Thank you. Thank you. So, an interesting aspect that we might need collaboration with private entities to foster this shift. Professor Prembrat, I'll come to you next with the same question in terms of how much of this shift is viable right now from a content-based assessment to a competency-based assessment?
Well, I think that in the present scenario, the conventional system of examination would stay. I would disagree that you don't require the examination. Examination is a necessary evil. If you don't have it, there is no learning. And therefore, what's important, what kind of examination? It's not a question of whether to have an examination, but what kind of examination. Obviously, in an ideal scenario, a continuous project-based, team-based learning, problem-solving based solution is an answer. And therefore, that requires a limitation on the number of students that you admit. When you admit 2,500 students in a particular program, is it feasible, even humanly feasible, to have one-to-one matching of evaluating that person? And if we have gone in for a mass scale assessment, technology has further enabled it. So what's important here, that while use technology for the purpose of enhancing the reach and improve academic productivity, but never be too much obsessed with using technology to conduct examination. Perhaps it might interest you to know that, I don't know, I have been associated with teaching even right now. I teach a course in my current university, irrespective of my designation. So I know the mentality, the examination system conducted online has ruined the quality of examination system totally. There is no learning at all, because in fact, even if you, with all the technology tools and AI-based solutions, people are smarter enough to know if you only look at his eye movement and head movement that some of these softwares do. They're smart enough to hoodwink that system, and therefore, any type of question you make, the Google would provide an answer, and therefore to me, examination must be offline, must be involving the learner, must be through teamwork, and that's a very major task. I don't think our university system, the mass production system that it has now become, and the kind of teachers we engage are capable of handling that one-to-one interaction on a project-based learning, and obviously much more for skill-driven. They themselves need to know how you use that knowledge to solve the problems of society. And therefore, it's a great, and there could be no debate on whether to have that continuous assessment. But how to do it, I don't think the current state of universities are in a position to involve it.
Extremely interesting, slightly contrarian point of view, but definitely that too much leveraging of technology for exams might be inimical to the ultimate effect. I'll come to Sahil next. Again, on this similar point about what are your views on this competency-based assessment method?
Thank you. So I take a cue from sir and I agree with him. Actually, technology does not make much of a difference when it comes to assessments. We have to look at the core of assessment and identify what's the purpose. So currently, mostly assessments are happening as a way of releasing the students. You know, that our job is done, they are passed and now they can go out and work in the society. Assessments are not actually happening to facilitate more learning among the students. Whether we use technology or not, it does not make a difference. At the core of assessment, we have to put purpose. That is, and I'll give my conclusion with a story from 2000-year story from Takshashila, and this fascinates me truly. Jivak and Atre, they are two giants of Ayurveda, the people who created the system of Ayurveda. One is the teacher, the other is the student at Takshashila. And the student goes to the teacher and says that, Guruji, now I feel I should go out and serve the people. He's studying Ayurveda there. And the Guru says, go to the forest, bring me some plants that don't have any medicinal value. He goes out, spends a few days, comes back and says, Guruji, I could not find any such plant. The Guru says, now you are ready to go out and serve the world. This student ends up becoming the personal physician to Gautam Buddha. That's assessment. No uniformity, no kind of a system under which this assessment is operating, no technology. It is just one-to-one, as sir was saying, because the Guru really knows the student has learned what the student came for. It is not possible in our current system. It's too mass scale, but collectively, I think we'll have to figure out some way of doing it.
Thanks. It's a nice story, and basically it implies the value of experiential learning. And that brings me to the next question for Ankit. The question is, how much are the faculty, because that's also an important, faculty prepared or ready to impart this experiential learning-based training?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. So I'll start with the assessment part first, and then we'll move to the readiness of the faculty and staff members onto this. Currently, we do have some 4 or 5 types of assessment patterns which are prevalent here. One is the formative assessment. This formative assessment is assessment for learning. Assessment for learning says what you actually do not know, and there is an assessment for that. The second says summative assessment. The summative assessment is for assessment for learning. So that is assessment for learning is assessment for what you actually know. So this is for that assessment. The third assessment is the diagnostic assessment, and the fourth one is continuous assessment that we all are talking about. Nowadays, we also have this benchmarking assessment as well that actually compares. Now, when we are talking about national education policies and the steps that are being taken when it comes to national education policy, there are very important benchmark steps that are going to be taken into national education policy. And when we are talking about experiential learning, it is very important that the instructors or the faculty members do get ready for the assessment as well. Currently, NEP doesn't offer a direct solution to what is going to be the precise assessment policy for the students, because this is an experiential learning wherein we are going to have a multidisciplinary approach in national education policy. And at the same time, as we all know and we have been talking about as well, like multiple entry and multiple exit system as well. So as Professor Premvat also talked about, there has to be an assessment system that is very fair, that is very transparent, and that actually assesses students' competency. Because we also know, and we have been talking about this as well, that 60% component is going to be for core credits, and for remaining 40% that can be online or the minor subjects or of the interest of the students. So it is going to be a combination or the amalgamation of all sort of stakeholders who are involved in the learning of the students to to come together and do assessment for the students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Manish, I'll come to you. Now you have heard all the academicians talking about specifically on the assessment, the competency-based assessment and experiential learning. So from an industry perspective, when we are trying to shift to this competency-based assessment model, how can the industry, as an industry solution provider, help the academic institutions offer more of these shift in the assessment base, what they are following till now?
So I'll touch upon a number of critical areas. So NEP talks about all formats of assessment. So it talks about formative, summative, and it also talks about peer assessment, it talks about self-assessment, it talks about teacher assessments. So they've tried to cover every known jargon of assessments which is there, and that's put in there. We've been in this industry for nearly, a decade and a half. We also believe that, are we assessing just the student, or are we also assessing the efficacy of the delivery of learning? Because each institute, university, school, whatever body that we belong to, will have a particular efficacy of delivery of the learning. Every faculty, every department, a college will have a different efficacy of delivery. So the assessment as a single and foremost means of measurement is working both ways. It's just that we are focused on the learning and the student part, but that's not true. As an institute of repute, we need to be careful that this measurement is also a measurement of the efficacy of the impartation of learning. So if you slice and dice it on a different dimension, if you slice it on the teacher, on the faculty, see the trend, you will find a lot of interesting use cases. Where does technology play a role? Technology plays the role because, as learned academicians over here, they talked about that we just don't have the capacity to do a 1:1. Perhaps that would have been best, but we don't have that. So what is it that we could perhaps do which could help, at least reach midway, some way forward? So we did a lot of interesting pilots. For example, we worked with a very large university with nearly 150,000 students, and they had this continuous evaluation which colleges were doing. Colleges were assessing the students on some project work and giving the marks to the central university, and they were compiling it. So we said, let's throw technology in, let assessment happen the way it is, let them upload the project material which is visible to everybody. We'll do nothing. There's no AI, there's nothing. But the technology will make it visible to everybody. Do you know what happened to the marks? They changed. The marks changed dramatically. Same cohort, same students, same faculty, we saw a different trend. So technology can help bring in transparency at scale. And it's not about just proctoring. Proctoring came into being because of the COVID and inability to, have the physical exams. But technology can play a role in making the same assessments more powerful. So you could have digital evaluation of the scripts, but they could now be on a platform so that you could have a quality check layer on it. Because it's not that every evaluator evaluates the scripts uniformly. But as an institute, as a body of repute, you have a responsibility to evaluate every student uniformly. So we need to be sure that, if some teacher is faltering on meeting the rubrics, then what do? So we should have a quality check mechanism which is easy to do on a technology platform. You could bounce 10% of the scripts of an evaluator anonymously to another evaluator, and that's suddenly the mere fact that the evaluator knows that this is getting bounced. That itself becomes the trigger for him to pay more attention to what he is doing during evaluation.
Perfect.
So, assessment is psychological. It is also about how efficiently we are delivering it. And lastly, I would want to say that this is the only means to create big data in education. So if you ever want to create any kind of AI, analytics, or anything on top of the data, then because we cannot have complete virtual education, right? You can't have just an LMS and that's the end of education. That's utopian. It's not going to happen. So in a physical world, assessment plays the role of creation of big data, which will act as the basic backbone for creating any analytics.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of very important points. One is that assessment is not just about assessing the student, but also the efficacy of the delivery of learning. And the second was you mentioned more innovatively leveraging technology to improve the quality of assessment. So now, since we are having a paucity of time, I will run through each panelist and 1 minute to each panelist to talk about, since the topic is on NEP, one provision in NEP which you feel, which has the potential to significantly alter the whole paradigm of education, especially in the university. So starting with you, Professor Prem.
Well, I think it's the one thing that you're talking about, although it's very difficult to find one thing in it, such a holistic thing, but the game changer is going to be the flexibility and the academic bank of credits, which would enable a student to take a course from wherever and transfer the credits. This will also put the institutions on their toes, because if they're not able to delight the students, he has an option to take it from anywhere else. And if you're offering great quality, students from anywhere else will take your courses. And therefore, the academic bank of credits and the flexibility of offering it in a modular manner is one such major game changer, and for which, fortunately, the Ministry of Education has, and the UGC have put a roadmap in place where you can take a course from anywhere in the world and you can convert them into an equivalent credit. To my mind, that is going to be a major game changer. You wanted only one.
Yeah, so the very important point is flexibility of students being allowed to shift to universities that they prefer. Sudhanshu, your one critical point in NEP provision.
So I absolutely totally agree with what Professor Premraj said, to me and to my mind, and not just as part of the higher education system, but also as a parent. And my daughter was here recently before going back to US to complete her degree. And the one thing which I realized is that what we are trying to put in place now has already been there for ages back home in the Western countries. Now, the way I look at that power is this. While the intent is huge, you give the flexibility to someone like me or him or someone else to actually go and pick some subject or some course in the best of the best places and be able to do that from there versus where he is supposed to be doing it. My only worry in this whole thing is every university or every higher education institute cannot be put on the same platform. Primarily because of the depth of subjects which you teach and the faculty quality that you have. Now, can you say University A is equivalent to University B is equivalent to University C? If that was the case, everyone in NAC rating would have come at 4 and 4. So that's not going to happen. So there has to be a system where you need to equalize, because I've seen this. I mean, many of the people I've been talking to, they say, ACP is damn good, but that university is not good enough for me to accept their rating and credit. So if tomorrow he goes to a university and he does subject and comes to me, it's entirely left to my imagination, where the quality of what he has done over there is, the A grade is same as my A grade. So unless we bring that, the whole power of this academic bank is going to go out of the window.
Sure.
I think the point he has made, as I mentioned, that the Ministry of Education has formulated a roadmap to implement academic bank of credits. And I happened to chair that meeting, which actually had about 7 or 8 Central University Vice Chancellors, and the AICT chairman was also a member of that committee. We have responded to these issues. You look at the, for example, it's not compulsory for anybody to take, the university or the institution would have freedom to identify and have an MOU with institution that you think are comparable in caliber. So it's not going to. No, there has to be, there is nothing like an unlimited flexibility in life. Flexibility is only enabler. And therefore, if you implement NEP as an unlimited flexibility, you will never be able to implement it. You
Sure,
require. So there is a freedom available to you to tie up with institutions that you think are comparable.
So-
because otherwise, you can't have a.
It can be evolutionary
Absolutely,
and moving
you decide.
towards.
And you can have MOU with as many institutions you wish. The choice is with you.
30 seconds on this. I think I need to respond to this. See, my point is very simple. So there is a regulatory body and there are many of them, not just one, for whom you go through to actually become a college or a university. Now, if there is a standard procedure for certifying a place as a university or a college, then there is no question of the university not being good and comparable to each other. So I differ with the core.
Okay. Got it. Yes.
You know, I was listening to the speech of Prime Minister on NEP. He said two things are important. One is lab to land or land to lab. If a student learns that by means of creative thinking, by means of continuous, by means of anything, by means of blended learning, by means of digital learning, anything. The second thing he said was also very important. That was parinam se praman ka praman. That whatever you are doing, you are teaching the student, whether he has learned it, you get a certificate from the field, if he is working for the social outreach, for the industry, if he is working in the industry, if he is working in the internship. So multidisciplinary approach with these facilities, if you do this in 1 minute, in half a minute, I can say if you do this in a proper manner, with all the creative thinkings, all the research, I think you are going much ahead because you are thinking of the country as such, you are thinking of the nation as such.
So your emphasis is on that multidisciplinary approach.
I think one factor that gets missed out in the discussions is the emphasis on teacher education that has been put in NEP. I think that is going to be transformative because teachers are at the core of education. We have a lot of talk on student-centric education. I think what gets missed out is teacher-centric educational system. Unless we create a system which attracts great people to become teachers, we cannot create a great education system. So the reforms that will happen in B.Ed education, the integration of teacher education with other streams, that is going to play a transformative long-term role.
Thanks. Ankit.
Well, after academic bank of credit, the flexibility that has already been talked about, the multidisciplinary approach, I think internationalization of Indian education and especially Indian courses in astrology and Vedic sciences, yoga and naturopathy, this is another important aspect wherein India is going to gain a lot out of national education policy. As I was very recently talking to one lady in AICT and she mentioned very important facts to me. She said nearly 10 lakh Indian students go to 80 different countries every year, whereas we have got from 26 different countries, there are 40,000 students coming to India. So we can see a huge gap over here wherein Indian students are going to different countries. So we need to invite students from outside India to come and study here in India. And NEP can definitely play a very vital role into this.
So that both-way student movement, that's where your emphasis is. Manish.
So I think by the end of the whole lineup, we'll cover the NEP policy completely. But I think that, we really cannot predict the future. So the one thing which I take from the NEP is that their ability to give the right in the hands of the student to choose what he wants to study. And we could debate on how flexible we want that to be, but that is kind of, countering the lack of change in curriculum because that is top down. But now giving that right in the hands of the student, we are kind of ensuring that he would be able to choose depending upon what the environment is. Because in a 3-year course, in a 4-year course, the world is going to change dramatically, and your curriculum might just not be able to take pace and change according to that.
So in an almost utopian kind of world, a student might be studying mathematics and music at the same time. Exactly. Exactly, why not?
Follow your passion.
True.
You really allow them to follow that.
Exactly.
I don't think students shifting too much completely whole stock and barrel from one university to another, but I do see that students could opt for taking some courses from some other place if it was feasible, and that could add some value to their degree, even remotely, just optional, no credit to the degree, but that's something which would provide a lot of richness to which otherwise might not be possible.
Exactly. Dr. Parvinder, yeah.
Not much is left to say now, but still, one of the component which impressed me, that is the Higher Education Council of India. We are fed up with multi-regulatory bodies in our country. In one university, if there are 4 courses, one is by AICTE, second by PCI, then BCI, DCI, MCI, everything. So there should be one apex body, transparency, efficiency, and honesty also. That will raise the quality of education in our country. That's the HECI is a wonderful project. It must be implemented as early as possible.
So one apex body, and maybe for paucity of time, we could have discussed otherwise the one university entrance exam, the QUET thing that is being talked about. Okay, thanks to all the panelists. With that, we come to the end of the panel discussion, and I will request if the panelists can join for a group photograph. Yeah.